Hey everyone! In this video, I'm going to show you how to use your micro tiny wisdom warrior to create a really cute pair of earrings. And the beads I'm using today are my leftover beads from the November 2024 Creative Soul Kit. And so I'm going to be using those to create a little bonus pattern of earrings to complement the main project, which was the little Del Sol pouch necklace or purse charm. And so this is going to be a pattern that complements that, but it's different. And it's got a few similarities just to keep it kind of simple. If you've made that first one and you're starting this one, I'm going to be using the same number of warps, for example. But the pattern is just a little bit different. And to get started, what you'll want to do is we're going to warp the tiny loom. And the best way to do that is to work from your thread spool and to start by tying off a knot here to this little notch at the top of your loom. And if you're new to this earring loom, this is maybe your first time using it, this video, you can bookmark this. It will serve as a nice beginner intro to how to warp it and to how to use it. So to tie a knot, I'm just going to go ahead and bring the thread around kind of from the inside to grab the notch first. And then just kind of pull it like that. And then let's just go ahead and tie a quick double knot. And leave about 5 to 7 inches of a tail on there. We're going to trim that, but it'll help you to have a little bit extra because we're going to use it to tie off the end of the warp. And so I found a way that makes it pretty easy to finish it when it's one of the kind of counts that ends up at the same side, which this one is. So you'll have this little knot here on the side, and what you'll want to do is just go ahead and bring your strand up in between those two again. And this time, go ahead and go through the first notch on your earring loom. And then carry on down to the bottom here. Keep going through the bottom comb on the other side. And from here, if you put your thumbnail or fingernail on top of the thread, and then just kind of bring it up through the next notch, and then keep holding on while you pull it through, it'll keep a nice tight tension and it'll guide that thread without slipping while you make that little turn. Same thing up here. I'm going to bring that through like that. And I'm just going to hold the thread in place with my thumbnail while I bring the thread up around the comb. So you want to keep doing this, adding each warp thread. And in the case of this current project, I am going to be working with an 11-0 seed bead, so I'm going to make the spacing here 1 for 1. And so the number of warps I need, that's always going to be dependent on your pattern. Our pattern has 17 beads per row, so it's kind of a serious pattern. So 17 beads per row means I'm going to need 18 warps. So I'm going to need a strand on each side, and then one to go between every single bead. So I'm going to just keep doing this same motion that you're seeing me do here until I have a total of 18 warp threads ready to go. And you'll notice with an even count, that'll put you back up at this top part after you've added your last strand. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera for a second while I finish this, and then we'll tie off the top. All right, there's 18 warp strands. And if you're looking for like an easy way to count them, it's kind of tricky to count from the top here because they just kind of blend together. Your eyes will just gloss like over it. But if you count up here, count the number, and you can even like guide your thumbnail or fingernail over, that's like the best way to count. So that's how I usually do it. And because this is even count, it's going to put you up here at the top. If you're ending with an odd count one, just for knowledge, you'll be down on this side, and you can just bring your thread up along the back through a comb to meet your tail thread over here. It's really a lot easier to tie off with your tail thread, which is what I like to do for ending my warps on this loom. So mine is just right here. It just came up after my last warp strand, and I'm going to just go ahead and bring it under the combs over to this side. And just to keep everything from wiggling on me while I try to do this next part, this knot, because it'll kind of loosen up on you just a tad. So just to keep it nice and tight, I'm going to go around that loop, not loop, but this edge bar one extra time. And I actually went through the notch with it to meet the tail here. And so let's hold everything in place and let's cut it free from our spool now. So there's that. Just move that spool really quick. And take these two strands here and just tie a double knot. There's one. And there's two. You can do three if you want, but you just want to make sure it's not going to come loose. And once you've done that, to make it easier on yourself, go ahead and trim that to like right about there, so it's not getting in your way while we do our next part of the stitching. All right, so take this beautiful setup ready to go loom and get another strand of thread. And this time cut about a little under a wingspan to a wingspan of thread. You should be able to do this without having to add. And this time you do want to trim it right from the spool. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that and get a needle. So here's my beading needle. I'm going to thread that on here. And fold down a substantial amount of thread. I usually go for like 15 inches or so, just to make it easier for me to work with the amount of thread I've got on my needle. Bring it under your warps and leaving about a 10 to 12 inch tail over here on this side, we're going to string row 1. So row 1 of your pattern, working either from the top or the bottom, it actually doesn't matter, but I'm going to go ahead and just put those quickly on the needle here. All right, so there is my row 1 ready to go. And the first row is always the trickiest, I find. But the best way to get the first row started is you can use your needle as a way to like kind of give you something to press the beads underneath the warp strands with, because the goal is going to be to bring these up and underneath the warps and situate each bead in between a strand. So what I'm doing right now is I'm bringing the needle back through all of them. And if you hold on to the thread where it's coming out of the bead, it will help you so that it kind of just stays right there all on the needle like that. And let's bring our work down a little bit here. All right, and I want to make sure that I'm keeping my tail thread over here on this side of the loom under the warps. And let's bring all of the beads on. So once you get a few of them situated, they do tend to pop right back out a little bit, but try to get a few in here. And if you're having any trouble, let me show you one trick I almost forgot to share. It's one of these optional things that kind of just works wonders, especially for the first step. There is this beautiful tassel maker, and I believe Jules is including these when you order the loom now. So what you want to do is bring this underneath the warp strands and then just like turn it like that. And you'll get a little bit of a tighter tension on there than I was able to achieve with just my own winding, right? So let's see if that makes this next step any easier. Yeah, look at that. So those are just popping right in place. And so what you want to do is just get your finger underneath it. And as you get each one, try to hold it there. And you might have to individually help some strands as you go. And just kind of to be expected. I'm going to do it one by one just here, heading toward the edge. You might reach a point where you've got a few. Just move them together. Push this all together here. Keep that bead over here. With that one. There we go. There we go. Okay. Once you've got them situated, you can pull the needle out. I just wish my finger was longer to trying to keep them all stuck in there. This is a particularly wide start. Wide starts are always a little more challenging. So this is kind of a slightly more advanced pattern. If you're new to this loom, I would suggest trying it first with like a 9 bead wide row. And so what I'm doing right now, guys, is I'm passing my needle back through all these beads above the warps this time. So I had the needle underneath just to kind of stabilize them, and I removed the needle once I had them positioned. And now what I'm doing is the overpass back over the warps through the beads. And each time I do that, I do work with the eye side of my needle. And the reason I like to do that is so that I know I don't puncture any of the warp strands. It'll make it easier for me to pull the warps in later. If they, like if you were to stitch through one of these strands, then it's stuck in that position, so you can't adjust it. And I like to be able to move them a little bit afterward, and I like to pull the warp in so I don't have to weave them all in. So that's why I'm being careful there, but you can always sew them in. It's optional. It just will save you some time to work with that eye side. And so I've got that all through finally, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull. And this first one, be really careful with your knots. Go slow. The thread will have your spool memory, so it's going to want to make little curly cues. There you go. Okay, so row 1, give yourself patience. Take your time with it, especially with this really wide one. And there you go. All right, so I'm going to bring my needle back underneath, and I'm going to string row 2. So there's my row 2 beads. The second row is always so much easier. So you've got something to slide them around with and something holding the threads in precisely the right position. So it's usually not necessary to put your needle back through it to stabilize it. So it looks like I grabbed one extra bead here by accident. Let me show you what to do if that happens. I do that by accident sometimes. You can just go back through the bead, and it will just fall off. All right, so again, I'm going to work with my eye side because I like to make sure I don't puncture any threads that way. And what I'm doing here is just passing back through all the beads. And I'm actually being really careful so I don't go under a warp. I want to make sure this is going through the beads, staying above these threads this time, because remember we were under it, now we're going over it. And that's what makes that little sandwich that keeps the beads in the right position. Now, if you have a business card, bead scooper, something like this, where you can kind of slide the beads around, it can be really nice to go ahead and make them line up a little bit this way. It's also a test to see if I punctured any warp strands. So that's also really cool. Let's do one more row. All right, there's our third row. I'm just going to slide that down and help each of those beads tuck right up, just like that. And same thing, just going to bring the needle back through those beads. And we're staying over the warps that time. And there we go. After you get on 3 rows, it'll be harder for you to slide them like this. In fact, it will become pretty unwieldy to do so. But if you're looking for a way to test to make sure you didn't puncture a warp thread, you can use your fingernail too to do this. But I like to just test it and see they all still move. So I can move that down and tighten up. And so this is a nice, quick, short pattern. We're just going to finish it to the top, and then we'll take it off the loom together. So here it is, all finished, and super beautiful pattern here. So we're going to have some fun turning it into a really gorgeous earring. So first we'll need to remove it from the loom. And removing it from the loom is super, super easy. You just go ahead and trim the place where we knotted at the very beginning. Don't trim anywhere else, just the place where we knotted. So that's the tail thread and the very edge one that came around the back here, right? So it should now be free on this side. Might have a little knot on it. Don't worry about that. It's okay. And then on this side, you'll have this edge strand here. It will be free as well. Quite short as well. Don't worry about that. We have a plan. So one side of your work, just take your thumbnail and lift the warp off of the teeth of the comb there. And there we go. So now the piece is free. Right, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and just pull these warps in. And when you first get started with like the first strand, sometimes it helps to have chainless pliers, but you don't really need them. I think the reason I use them is because when they're really short like this, it's just hard for me to do something like wrapping it around my finger to make it strong enough that I've got something to grip to pull, right? So starting with the side, I'm gonna just use my pliers. And what you're gonna see happen here when I pull on this strand is it's going to take this loop down here, this very edge one right here, and it's going to tighten it up right below that bead. And you just kind of want to put your hand on top of the work, making sure everything stays nice and, not cinched up or buckled. So now that one is taken care of. Switch to the bottom because we just pulled from the top. So now we want to pull this loop right here down. There it is. All right. Next loop, traveling back up. One thing you just want to double check for is that each loop is free. It's not bringing any of the other loops, with it, because it'll try to hug other loops and bring them through. You do want to watch for that. Just keep pulling these through. And each time you do this, your strand's going to get a lot longer, which is great because it's going to give us an extra strand. Here's an example of it's pulling some with it. Make sure it's free. We want a long strand. At the end, we'll have this extra long warp, and that's going to be really helpful for us because we're going to use it to finish our earring and do something cool. And this absolutely works on really big pieces. If this is your first time seeing this technique, I know a lot of you guys have seen us do this a lot, but this works on the big jewel looms and the other looms too. You just end up with a much longer strand, especially if it's a wide piece like this one. So you see how we're just going top to bottom, bringing each one along. So you're done with all these little strands in no time. And this is why working with that eye side of your needle is just kind of like a guarantee that you won't puncture any of those threads. It's probably the best advice I can give for how to get 100% success rate for this step. You'll know if you've punctured a thread because when you try to pull one of these through, it just won't move freely. I really do believe that it helps to go with the eye side of your needle when you're doing the looming. All right, so this is going to take me just another minute. Each of these pulls is going to get much longer, so I'm just going to keep going and meet you over here. We'll have a super long strand at the end. All right, so here it is, and that method will give you a nice treat of only having 4 strands to weave in. You'll have the tail thread you started with your weft thread for looming. And you'll have the end of that thread, probably still has your needle on it like mine does. And then you'll have your 2 warp strands. They'll probably be at the top for you. And on the even count designs, they tend to end up on the same side. So I'm going to weave in all but one of them. I'm going to keep the super long one here, which is the one that was that really long warp that we just pulled up on this side. I'm going to keep it handy, and it's going to be the one that I do all my finishing work with. But these other ones you can go ahead and weave in. And if you're looking for some tips and tricks on how to do weaving in for each of these types of strands, there's another video you're going to want to check out, which was the Del Sol pouch on Jewel Loom YouTube channel. And that's a great way to see tips and tricks for weaving in. I'm just going to go ahead and stop the camera and do that here, and then we'll get into finishing the earring. All right, so ready to create some embellishment. So I have 2 pip strands, and these were in the November kit. But you can grab like any little beads you've got, little fire polish will work. I think I really like this color, and I'm gonna go with that one, but use any color you would like to use. And the beads I'm gonna need are the ones that are along this row here on the side. So when we loomed this design, we loomed it in, you know, this direction, but I'm gonna suspend the earring in this direction so that I have the sides of my holes to work with. And it makes it just a little bit easier. I wanted to go ahead and point out a couple things we're gonna need to do to get started with the next step. First is I gotta trim off this knot that I had from the loom on the long strand that I kept. And I'm gonna pop a needle on there. And we're gonna need to put this thread in a little looping pattern around the edge bead because it is a warp strand. Remember, it was the super, super long warp strand we had left at the end of that last exercise. And I haven't trimmed it yet, so I mean, I'm probably not gonna need it all, but I'm gonna see what happens. So go around this red bead here on the edge. And the reason for that is this strand that I'm holding is the strand that's supporting this whole edge. See, it is that string right there. So because of that, you want to go ahead and just go over that edge bead before you start doing your next step. And so just to do that, I'm actually going to pick up the little weft thread that's running through it. See? I'm just bringing my needle under that just to get it something to lock into. And the little loop should just sit on the side. And now I'm just going to go down through that bead. So you do want to do that because otherwise you're going to have the potential of these edge beads coming loose because this is the strand supporting them all. All right, so let's cut free these beautiful beads here. It's a little knot here at the top. I'm just going to very gently free that knot. Okay. And let's go. So I was thinking it would look really cool to do kind of a little overlapping swirl. So I'm going to pick up a red bead and then I'm going to pick up 3 pips. String that down and take a look. What does it look like if you skip a few beads and go into the next? So we're going to make it so that it looks like that. So I'm going to pick up a brown bead and go up through this brown one here. And so it's going to look like that. Super, super cute, right? And so what I did here is I skipped a row. So we came up through, you'll see we came up through this row here. And then I just used the wefts to travel over down through these beads here. So I skipped this row here. And I'm going to repeat what we did before, matching the color. So I've got a yellow because I'm coming out of the yellow bead. And pick up 3 of these really pretty pip beads right here. And then we're going to skip the next row, and go into the bead that's starting at the next row after that, which is a green. So I'll pick up a green bead. And again, if I get through a few extra beads, like 3 of them is good, can only serve to make it stronger. So let's really slowly pull that through. I'm getting tangles. I might need to shorten my thread. There we go, and they'll overlap just a little bit. It's super cute. Okay, and so I'm going to do the same thing we did before. I'm going to just use my weft threads as a way to get over into basically going to skip the middle row there and exit from the next row. So it's basically skip one, go to the next, right? From here, just make that turn. Down through the bead here. Sorry about that. I've got a little bit of a challenge with getting my needle where I want it. So I'm trying to just get through the beads and not hit any thread. All right, so you see I've skipped this one and I'm going to the next one. Same thing again. Green bead, 3 pip beads. Green because that's the color that I'm exiting. 2, 3, And then which color will I be going through? I'm going to be skipping the next row and going through the next one. So that's yellow. So we'll grab a yellow bead and let's head up through this one. And again, I got through about 3 beads. It seems to be what's happening here. So when you do this, if you'd like to arrange that one behind the one before it, you can. I think it kind of makes them lay in a way that really looks nice. But it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, they're going to overlap a little bit, and that's going to give them a little bit of dimension, a little 3D looking dimension there. Okay, let's get down through these. All right. And now we've got a brown bead. Here's 3 more of those really pretty pip beads. 1, 2, 3 of those. And now I need a red bead because we're headed into the last bead of the row. Last row, I mean. Yep, and the last bead. And I'm just going to go through it. And if you want, you can go all the way through this entire edge if you'd like. Because we want to be at the top now. We're going to put a loop for our ear wear. So just a simple little earring design. But isn't it cute? Look at that. I just thought that was neat. And you can play with this like if you want. I mean, I was just going for like what looks like a little bit of a rug edge on the bottom. But like if you wanted to, you could. If you wanted it to have less of an upholstery feel, you could kind of like make each of these a different length. So for example, this was 1 bead, 3 pips. You could go 3, 4, 5 beads, 3 pips, and then 5 beads back up. So making that same journey, but then they would be different lengths, and that could look super, super cool. I might have to try it just to see it. And how they layer up, I kind of just have each one, like this one is behind this one, the next one's behind that one, but you could do either. However you think it looks good. And feel free to use the other color. So to make a really simple, easy like loop up here, we're just going to travel over there. I just went down through a few beads. I'm going to use my weft traveling trick just to get over to the middle. And again, that's just picking up those beads that were the threads you loomed with, right? They're the top thread that runs in between all the beads. When you get to the third center 3, so let me show you really quick. Pull this through. You have a green bead and a clear bead and a green bead. Those are your center 3. You want to get to the edge of the center 3 there. And we'll just put a loop here over the center 3 beads. So here's 2 green, 2 clear, and 2 green. Jump over the middle one, go ahead and skip it, and then head down through the next. And you'll get that cute little pop there. So that is the earring. We're going to need to weave around and reinforce that, put an ear wire on it, but that's pretty much all there is to it. And there it is. I'm using this little weft travel trick to get myself over to reinforce this. Let's reinforce it 3 times. I'm going to come up through that. And I want to show you one other little trick that can help you with getting the loop up here to look really sharp. So you know how we've been working on this side with the reinforcing and everything when I just went through? You can flip it now, bring your thread over here, and work on this side, which will put this loop locked in on both sides of the warp strand that runs that top row. And then you can work these turns to get, these reinforcing traveling turns through like a different section. So I'm down below row 4 now, whereas before I was going under row 3. So it's just distributing this kind of like weaving in and traveling over a different row each time. So you're not overlapping tons of thread in one row. All right, and so see when I exit from this bead here at the top, do you see how the beads are kind of hanging out on this side of the warp thread? Well, now when I come up through here and go through the loop, it's going to really make sure that this stays looking like it's just right part of the row, right? See? It covers up that edge bead completely. So there's 4 passes. That's probably pretty good. You can do a 5th if you want. But use the same method that we've been using to travel as a weaving in method. So go through some beads, go under some weft, go through some beads, under some weft. I'm going to go all the way down here and do that. And then go ahead and trim your thread after you've done that. I hope so much that you've enjoyed this wonderful video for the Jewel Loom Creative Soul project, November 2024, and I look forward to seeing you for next month's project.